Hey guys, I hope all is well. I'm back in Path of Exile Settlers of Kalgur League with a build featuring Bladestorm. With this new league, PoE 3.25 introduced a buff to all melee skills, and I was originally gonna play a different non-melee build, but I kinda wanted to go melee to see for myself how good it's become, and I'd say melee is in a pretty solid good place right now. This is probably the most accomplished of all my characters, honestly. It's on the more beefy side of how I usually build a character with about 4900 life, capped attack block at 78%, 15% spell block, 86% spell suppression, immunity to freeze, chill, bleed, poison, corrupted blood, 100% reduced effect of curses, 70% reduced shock effect, immunity to hinder and maim, also with 3% chaos res, which certainly goes a long way. And lastly, it's got about 800 life regen per second and about 1k life leech per second without Vaal pack. It got me all 4 Voidstones, which usually I have to pay for an Uber Elder service, but it was able to do Uber Elder even though I did die once because I didn't see a slam coming, and it did do Deathless Uber Eater, which did surprise me. When it comes to Sirus, it did struggle a bit, but that's because I'm still not that good yet at the boss fight, and other than that, it took down the Forgotten, the Formed, the Twisted, and the Elderslayers. I tried doing a feared run, but after I took down Cortex and Atziri, I wasn't able to do Chayula, Shaper, and Elder all at once. I think I just need more practice and probably some more Chaos Res, and I'd probably be able to get it down as well. And I'm currently showcasing a run through and attempt at full clearing a T17 Citadel, which I was able to do pretty comfortably for the most part. I just wasn't able to kill the boss because I just don't have enough experience fighting the T17 bosses. I've just never built a character that's come this far, but I am practicing and getting better, so hopefully I'll get there one day. But either way, the damage and survivability from the build is definitely there. It's just a matter of getting used to the boss mechanics and stuff like that. With all that being said, I understand bleed builds have become incredibly popular with the Gladiator Ascendancy, but I often go the off-meta route with my builds, and I decided to go slightly off-meta and do Slayer instead. And before I jump to the video, please let me know what you think of the build, leave me some feedback on any improvements, let me know what build you'd be interested in seeing in the future, and like, comment, and subscribe for more videos. So we are playing Bladestorm, which is a melee AoE duration skill that automatically applies bleeding with every hit, so I just wanted to build off of that. I pretty much jump around and leave Bladestorms everywhere, and I can leave up to 4, which will last a few seconds and continuously attack. And due to my Ascendencies, the more enemies I kill, the bigger the area of effect of my Bladestorm is, up to a 50% increase, which is nice for quality of life. I have decided not to ever switch into Sandstorm because I don't benefit at all from it, since this is a physical dot multi bleed based build, so we don't ever change our stances. And it honestly works out pretty nicely, especially with Enduring Cry and Blood Rage for endurance and frenzy charges, and we end up being pretty strong and tanky overall. Other than that, every now and then I drop my banner, use my Vaal Molten Shell, turn on my Tincture, and pop Vaal Double Strike whenever I need to. As far as league starting goes, leveling a duelist is pretty easy, honestly, since you can pick up any AoE melee skill and add damage to it, or pick up any single target melee skill and add AoE to it. Me personally, I went with Double Strike and added Melee Splash and Ancestral Call, and eventually I switched to Bladestorm at Act 3 level 28 after killing Gravicius, and then it's pretty much smooth sailing from there. You can use whatever mobility skill you want. I personally use Leap Slam because I like jumping over terrain. For gearing, we don't really use or need any unique items, so you pretty much just want to get a pair of weapons with as much phys DPS and attack speed as possible, preferably with dot multi if you can, and then the same goes for jewelry. For the rest of your gear, just fill it with life, res, dex int, and spell suppression if you can, and then I picked up life regen on my gear as a mini layer of defense. I got both my swords for very cheap, less than a divine each. I think the rapier was like 80c, both around 500 phys DPS, and I decided to leave my weapons be even though I could definitely get much higher phys DPS weapons, but it wasn't necessary because I pretty much did almost everything I wanted to with this character with these pair of swords. But I could have easily dropped a few more divine and upgraded my swords, no problem. problem. One thing to note is I opted to get Mana Leech on my gloves so that I didn't have to get it on the tree. And another thing is I get chill immunity on my boots and coupled it with freeze immunity on my Pantheon. And also I bought this expensive steel ring with vulnerability on hit, which is amazing for DPS. For my Flask setup, I'm running a granite with reduced shock effect, which I occasionally switch out for an amethyst with the same affix if I'm running against a chaos heavy boss. And I'm running a diamond flask with reduced curse effect, which I couple with the reduced curse effect on my Pantheon, along with the increased flask effect Eldritch mod on my chest, which gives me 100% reduced effect of curses on me. Then I use a quartz flask for spell suppression. Lastly, for my tincture, I'm running one that gives me 215% increased crit chance with melee weapons, with a 44% increase dot multi, which is insane for my DPS. Next up, for my gem links, I have Bladestorm linked to Brutality, Melee Phys, Volatility, Cruelty, and Critical Strike Affliction. So it's nothing crazy, no Awaken gems, which would definitely increase our DPS, but it's entirely unnecessary. We can just keep things simple. Then we got Vaal Double Strike with Melee Phys, Brutality, and Volatility, and this setup really helps with single target, especially early on when the gear isn't ramped up yet. And for my auras, I'm running Vitality, Flesh and Stone, Herald of Purity, and Precision. Then I have a cast when damage taken setup with Immortal Call. Then I have Leap Slam, faster attacks, and Endurance Charge on melee stun. This setup does actually help generate free endurance charges when I'm jumping into the middle of a pack, which is a nice boost in quality of life. Then I got Enduring Cry with Urgent Orders to cast it faster. And lastly, I just got a loose War Banner, Blood Rage, and Vaal Molten Shell just fit into wherever I could. So pretty simple gem links and setups. Honestly, nothing crazy or complicated. Alrighty, so for my skill tree, it's nothing complicated. I am pretty much going swords with block chance and bleed damage and dot multi. So pretty much get the sword nodes and the damage while dual wielding nodes with block, and then get some more over here. And then this cluster is good for DPS. And then I just come over here to get a little bit of spell suppression. And then I get this node to give me immunity to poison because my Helm has higher evasion than armor, which is really helpful. And this is very important because being a bleed based build, you always want your enemies to be moving because that triples the bleed damage. And on bosses, not all bosses move, and those that do move don't move very often. So this node makes it so that if I have a bleed on a boss, which has been on the boss for more than 4 seconds, then that bleed does damage that counts as if the boss is moving, which literally just means if a bleed is on a boss for more than 4 seconds, that bleed starts to triple in damage, which is amazing. And then I have this, which gives me melee hits Fortify, so this is how we get our Fortify. I have a Watcher's Eye over here, which gives me attack damage because of precision, and some good life regen because of vitality. And then over here, I have a large cluster jewel with Feed the Fury, Hit and Run, and Martial Prowess, all for damage, and Leech, and Spell Suppression. So this cluster over here is pretty important for our block chance. This one gives +3 max block chance to attack, so it pushes that 75% block cap to 78%. And I could have gotten a +2 to maximum block chance for attack and make that 80%, but I decided to get the spell block instead because I had 0 spell block and I'm not capped on spell suppression, so I have 15% chance to block spell damage and 86% chance overall for spell suppression. And then over here is just more sword nodes. This cluster here and this cluster here is very good for DPS. And then I have this node Anointed, which is also amazing for our DPS. And then lastly, for my Ascendencies, I opted to go first Brutal Fervor into Endless Hunger, and then Impact, followed by Bane of Legends as my Uber Lab. And then one very important thing to note is I do have a pair of Forbidden Jewels that give me War of Attrition from the Gladiator. So this node is amazing for bossing because every second that I'm next to a boss, they take 1% more damage. And boss fights tend to last like a couple minutes at the most, depending on what mods and what boss it is. So they're going to be taking like 60% more damage, 120% more damage. This is just too good of a node. And I think this is why a lot of people go Gladiator. So yeah, it's just very helpful to have a Forbidden Jewel combination. I think in total it cost me like 5 to 8 Divine or something like that. You know, obviously you build up to this point. This was my league start character. I didn't start off with any currency, but I just farmed it up and you know, you just build your character as it goes along and it can go a pretty long way. So in terms of damage calculations, you know, it does say 2 mil here, but I don't have everything turned on. If I've killed recently, it goes up to like 2.2 mil. And then because of my boots, the Eldritch mod on my boots drops brittle ground. So if the enemy's standing on brittle ground, it's like about another 100k DPS. And then it's also not factoring in if I planted my banner with 50 stacks. If I drop it, it goes up about 600 DPS, up to almost 3 mil. And then of course, because of War of Attrition, enemy in your presence duration, this is 1 second, so 1% more damage. So the more I add, you know, you can see the DPS really start to ramp up. At 10 seconds, I'm already like plus a couple 100k DPS. So, you know, the longer you're in the presence of a boss or like a really difficult to kill enemy, the DPS just skyrockets. And then lastly, we have our Vaal Double Strike, which once it goes off, each one does about 300k and I can summon 2. So it adds on like another 600k DPS. So, you know, our damage isn't horrible. It's enough to do like Uber Elder and stuff like that. It's enough to like clear tier 17s for the most part. Honestly, I'm pretty sure it can do anything. I'm not sure about the Uber bosses like that you get from the tier 17s because I just haven't had a chance to, you know, fight them or anything, but the damage is definitely capable of doing like the majority of the content in the game, which is pretty good for a league starter, honestly. So yeah, there you have it. Honestly, I had a lot of fun with this character. It's probably the most well-rounded character I've made thus far, and I was able to do more content, more bossing than I've ever been able to do before. Hopefully in the future I can get a lot more done, but for now I'm just gonna leave it at this. I'm probably gonna play this character a little more, try to get to 96, maybe upgrade my gear a little bit more and see how far I can go. But that is it for now. I will leave you with the Uber Elder kill. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Putrefy, rot, spoil, and fester.